Hello everyone, welcome to the Sound and Music Talk. My name's Kane and I lead the audio team at Grinding Gear Games.
I'm Kamil, Orman-Janowski. I'm a composer and I will talk about music today.
So we're going to split the talk in half. I'll start by giving you a bit of a rundown on some of the cool stuff we're doing with sound in Path of Exile 2. We'll get underway with that. So what better place to start than the sound of combat? So for PoE 2, there's a lot of lessons we've learned from PoE 1 and things that we want to try to do with the sound of combat in PoE 2. Obviously, things can get pretty hectic, you may have noticed, with sound, with attack speed and all that kind of thing. So we're trying to sort of control that, not control it, you still want a bit of the chaos, that's what makes it fun, but in little ways control things that can pop out more in the mix. And also making the sound in general more of a player-centric sound design. So you're always hearing what you're doing and the skills you're doing. So this sort of one thing that was a huge job that we've done is completely overhauling the sound of weapons in PoE 2. In PoE 1, there was sort of shared sound sets between the weapon-based types, so a sword might sound the same as an axe and things like that. But we wanted to completely redo all of that and find the fun in every weapon. So one poor soul on our sound team, Dominic, had the task of designing sounds for every weapon type in the game. So a sound set for us is the swing, the on-hit sound of the weapon hitting a monster, and also the drop sound of a weapon, and equipping the weapon. So now when you equip a sword, you'll have a nice, satisfying unsheathing sound. But I just want to give you a little clip here of how that is all sounding. Also, elemental on hits completely redone. There's Dominic on his first day, young whippersnapper. And here he is when he first started the combat rework, and oh my goodness, only 1 year later. Yes, it's a rough time, but he did very well. Oh, and then he also still had to mix them all. So it was, we thank him for that, it was very good. This is just a clip of how the weapons are working in inventory and drops. So there's like a satisfying sort of sound on equip, which I think is, pretty cool. And you'll also see here metal versions of base types sound different than wooden. So just little details, it just makes weapons a bit cooler, have their own identity. So dynamic mixing is how we're trying to control some of what you can hear at any given moment. So monsters are split into groups. This is just for us. We have like low tier fodder monsters that you're just killing all the time. A notable monster is something that might be spawning less, and then obviously bosses, and then the player stuff. So all of that has a hierarchical sort of mixing setup. So each of those things can slightly dip the volume of something beneath it. So it's a priority order, really. So that means players always on the top and the boss. So no matter what's happening, you should be able to hear the telegraphing of what's about to come. So here's a clip showing some of that. You'll always hear what the boss is up to. So yeah, just when the boss is using a skill or anything, even though there's a lot of monsters on screen, you're always going to hear that. So you may have seen yesterday 600 monsters, 100 bosses. It's kind of like a dream for a sound design team, but also a bit of a nightmare. It's like the dream is, oh my God, we get to work on so many monsters. And the nightmare is, oh my God, we have to deliver so many monsters. And but Chris and Jonathan are really cool, and they support us in the endeavor to make every monster unique with its sound set and give you a sort of fresh experience as you progress through the game. So we have a studio at the office now where we've recorded hundreds of hours of monsters, and everyone on the sound team is a qualified monster now, you might say. So there's a vocal performance on every monster in the game, which is to the animation, and it gives them a lot more life and variety. So I just want to give you an example here of a before and after for a monster. So this is before processing on this bloater here. And then after some basic processing. Yeah, so that was just me and my face and this gross bowl of water and a banana skin. So yeah, we get up to some pretty weird stuff. And in that vein, I'm just going to give you some clips of our whole sound team getting up to some pretty weird shit in the booth. But
just looking in the mirror.
We even have guests sometimes.
7 sets. Just die! Oh my God, look, it's working, it's sick.
What a powerful voice. Out of context, it's weird.
How do we get the sound? Look at his mouth. Apparent.
Unfortunate camera angle. So it's interesting how all those sort of very out of context, weird recordings end up sounding quite cool in the game. The next clip's really just to show off, because it'll be cool on the sound system to hear some of the sound design we've done on the bosses that are in the current demo. So.
It's the last thing you'll see.
Yeah, so it's pretty full on, but cool. Also a bit of, oh, thank you. Also a bit of druid in there, if you would have seen. Yes, and so monsters and bosses with dialogue, you know, they're talking a little bit. Something we did with Heist, I'm sure you would have noticed, that was quite a talky league, to say the least. Obviously that in the context of the league is cool. We don't want that much talking through the entire campaign and the whole game, so obviously it's scattered and there's cooldowns upon cooldowns and play chants and all that kind of thing. But it's just this little thing on monsters that sort of injects a bit of atmosphere and personality in the area that you're in, like, you know, just very occasionally hearing a monster yell something at you is pretty fun. So this is a carver area. So yeah, just little bits now and then. It's almost almost indistinguishable from just regular combat efforts, but just helps make it feel like a unique sort of experience. And also player characters talk a bit more, which you may have noticed in the teasers that we did for the Summer Games Fest. You will have seen they were commenting on more things than usual. So that's really quite fun. Jonathan was super keen to get some more outside of the box moments. So how do we do that? You know, like quirky one-off things that they might say during a boss fight. But, you know, once again, controlling how often that happens and not having it all the time. So each character will have something they might say in one moment and not another character in that same moment. So it just adds to the variety. But we have some super cool voice actors here, so I just want to show you a bit of those.
Eve, she calls to me. She has been dead for years.
You come to join, my beloved.
You will join them. You? How dare you use her voice? I will tear it out of your throat.
Perhaps the Karui will visit this place once more. This doesn't look good.
Yeah, so pretty fun, I think, like little scatterings around. And the last thing I want to just touch on before we pass to Kamil is environments and ambiences. So in Path of Exile 1, ambiences were pretty dense, you might say, and loud and tonal, right? Yeah, they kind of got in the way of music quite often. That's really Kamil's job, to worry about tonality. So for us this time, it's about finding more cinematic sort of ways of making a place feel real. There's still going to be some tonal elements where it's like necessary, but it's more working with Kamil than against him to make that work. So I'm just going to show you some of the really lush and beautiful sounding areas we have. You would have heard the reverb change when you leave the cave, which is pretty fun. Of New Zealand native birds, tuis you can hear there. So yeah, just a lot of effort has gone into making each place feel dynamic and alive. So yeah, thank you very much. I am super keen to hear anyone's feedback. So if you see anyone with a sound shirt on, I'm sure they'll feel the same way after you've played the demo. If you have any thoughts, please let us know. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello again. Let's talk about music for Path of Exile 2. So, what is the best inspiration for music? At least for me, it's a video game itself. There are 4 aspects, the most influential. First one is environment, then we have a culture, we have characters, NPCs and bosses, and events. We're not going to talk about events today because we want to avoid major spoilers. We also have 3 distinct civilizations. Vastiri in Act 2, Val in Act 3, and Karui in Act 4. Considering those 4 aspects, we'll talk about all those 3 civilizations and music for them. Let's start with Vastiri. So here we have a very first aspect, the environment. So I was thinking how I can depict desolation and vastness. I used some synth sounds, mostly long pads with a lot of reverb to match that vastness. I also used some ethnic instruments, which I will talk about later. We also have another element of environment, which is day and night. So if, let's say, a specific area has daylight, we can expect brighter tones. And other way around, if there's a night, using some drones, anything which can make more hostile character, maybe something sneaky. Then we have weather. Weather works kind of similar to the day and night. If there's rain, music can have some more depressive tones. I have a first example here. Let's take a listen. So, working with concept art, this is something which always gives me a lot of advantage, because I can start at the very beginning of the process. Here we have an example. This is the lost city of Ket. And here's another aspect of architecture. So, as we can see on this picture, It gives some ideas about instruments which we can use. Some Middle Eastern stuff, like duduk, maybe some ethnic guitars like oud. Now let's talk about bosses in Act 2. So the goal was to achieve a bold, aggressive, and terrifying character. For that, I used some guitars, some industrial elements, some ethnic instruments again, but I also used some tricks from the electronic dance music, like sidechain, to make the score more modern. And speaking of bosses, pretty much every boss in Path of Exile 2 is unique, so music has to match this concept. I've got an example from the Act 2. It's Fight with the Perennial King. Let's take a listen. Now let's talk about Val and Act 3. One thing which is always tricky is finding the right pace for music. Instead of trying to catch up with density of monsters, music in Path of Exile 2 is tailored for the specific environment. And in this case, we have a lush jungle, very much alive environment. So that gives some ideas about maybe we can use some complex patterns of percussion. We have also culture as influential aspect here. And since Val is partially inspired by civilizations like Aztec and Mayans, I use some ethnic woodwinds. Since Path of Exile is a fantasy universe, we mix a lot of stuff. So in this specific case, I use some Japanese taiko drums for jungle environment. Let's take a listen to the example. Val Empire is also about temples. So we have three aspects here. Culture, we have some sacrificial rituals, so that gives some ideas about, like we can use some horror elements. We have architecture, because Val temples are full of mechanisms, so music can benefit from some industrial elements, perhaps something which sounds strictly mechanical. And then we have environment, because many of those temples are overgrown. So I used some ethnic woodwinds, which are also used for the jungle environment. And here's an example from one of the temples, from Machinario. Sometimes better idea than using more tonal instruments is to use some sound design in music to match the environment better. Here's an example from the Snake Pits, where you can hear some ghost-like sounds, something brushing. Let's take a listen. And now the fun part, bosses, which you saw yesterday in the Val Temple. So here, character, ancient, terrifying. So I used for terrifying, for something horror-like, I use orchestra, some synth, some high strings, also some organic synths, and something more signature-sounding, death whistle, which has that eerie sound, and it's almost like a scream. I've got a clip of two bosses, which yesterday you could see during the keynote. Let's take a listen. Probably recognize both of them after yesterday. Last but not least, Karui. So this is like a perfect example of how culture influences musical choices. I was thinking about what's the right tool, but the answer was pretty much obvious, which is human voice. Expert helped us to develop a unique language for the battle phrases. Instead of just recording tailored content for specific tracks, we recorded the full toolkit, like chants, battle phrases, textures, shouts, and other sound effects. So we have plenty of content for future Karui-related music. We recorded that at Kenneth Mayer's Center here in Auckland, which is actually not far from here. Let's take a look at a clip from the recording. That's in context. Yeah, there's quite a bit of difference between recording and in context. As you could hear, I also used other instruments, like large percussion group, organic synths, some brass section, but also a lot of ethnic woodwind instruments like seashells. I distorted them a lot to make them sound more aggressive and bigger than live. And now let's talk about town music, my favorite section. This is the place where we spend a lot of time. We trade, we chat, we build our characters. So the music has to stand the test of time. It also has to be memorable. We have 4 aspects, which I mentioned at the beginning of my talk. Environment, culture, we have characters, because we have all NPCs, and we have events because we get quests from those NPCs. And all those 4 aspects together gives us a lot of inspiration for musical choices. As the last slide, I have a music clip from the King's March, which is Town in Act 4. It's a little bit nostalgic. There's also a live recording there of violin. Let's take a look. Thank you very much for attention. It's Q&A time.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jin. I am one of Kane's minions in the audio team, and I will be asking some questions today. As you can see, there is a QR code on the screen here. If you just scan that and send in questions, I can vet them and then answer as we go. We've actually already got some questions here. I'll just get this going. Kane, what is the weirdest thing you've ever personally done to get the sound?
Oh my God. This is an R16 thing, right? No. Well, I mean, the banana skin was pretty weird.
Yeah.
Like you kind of, to get like the real wet sounding monsters, you kind of almost half waterboard yourself. So that's pretty weird. I've also had, I don't know if you know the, is it the eater, the boss with the drowning orbs? So when you get into one of those orbs, you actually hear the sound of your character drowning, and there's a male and female character, so I drowned myself and my wife, and had a hydrophone in the sink, the kitchen sink, which is an underwater mic, so you can hear us drowning. I mean, we're acting, but yeah, it's pretty weird.
Great. A question for Kamil. Is the music in PoE 2 dynamic? Will it change from a more intense combat version to a more calm version once you aren't in combat any longer?
Well, it's not really dynamic in terms of following the density of monsters, or it's more. There's more of small elements for music narration, like intro, stingers, outro. Sometimes some extra phrases for some different music cues for different phases of boss fights.
And you're not out of combat very long, so
No. You always have something to do.
There's a lot of questions coming
It's also
in.
quite an old school solution.
And bosses all have their own music, so
Yes.
that's changing. Yeah.
Alrighty, another question for Kane. Mm-hmm. Have there been any sounds that you've conceptualized, but after implementation, you've decided, nah, I hate it, back to square one?
Yes, all the time. We iterate all the time, just like any other department, I guess. Like you get it in, and suddenly it's not right, and you need to re-record it or try something totally different. Because you're also trying to balance the fact that there's a lot of different monsters in the area, and sometimes by accident something might sound a little bit similar to something else. So we're always trying to make an area feel fresh and unique with the different composition of monsters and sounds in the area.
Cool. Another question for Kamil. What was your favorite League theme to compose?
Sorry, again?
What was your favorite League theme to compose?
I think the easiest one was Legion. It was quite natural. Sometimes it takes a lot of time and efforts and starting over and over again. But this one, I don't know, like just came very quickly.
Wonderful.
Is that your favorite?
There's no favorite. I hate them all.
They're all his babies.
Yes. I mean, this one is quite decent.
Yeah. Do you ever find any problems trying to combine the music and the sounds to the game?
That's both of us, I guess.
We're a pretty good team these days, aren't we?
Yeah, we collaborate a lot, especially, as you mentioned,
The ambience.
ambience and
Yeah,
music.
it's like a long period of time where maybe things weren't sort of working as well together. Like ambience were just very tonal and drony. But yeah, now we talk all the time, every day, about what we're doing. And
especially now when it comes to bosses.
Yeah.
You presented one of the boss fights with Siren.
Yeah, that's true. The Siren fight, where she comes up in the center during the petrification phase, where she can turn you to stone, that whole thing is sort of a combo of us working together. How do we cue the sound effect of her singing at the same time as music, and making it like a really unique moment for us to sort of stick out a bit? It was pretty fun to work on that together. Oh, every time she does that, she'll have a different vocal melody.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty cool. Side note.
Cool. Kamil, does the music you create have crossover over with what you listen to in your downtime?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Although I really, I listen to a lot of soundtracks. Sometimes I listen to some other stuff like Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails, and you might hear some influence for sure. Yeah, but mostly soundtracks, because soundtracks include like all possible genres of music.
Cool. Another question for Kane. How do you balance the volume of the different audio elements you've shown, music, ambience, effects, with the audio volume sliders players having access to it in the settings? Are you targeting a particular volume for these elements? Are you resting with a variety of different volumes?
Yes. So the sliders in game in PoE 1, they're all in the middle, which is kind of weird. Like they should be all full, and then you can only ever turn things down. So that's what we're doing in PoE 2, because it makes more sense. You can not get any weirdness with reverb sends and things. So balancing volume in areas is hard, and that's something, a lot of my job is just making sure every area is consistent and sounds good. But that's the dynamic mixing I was talking about. We do a lot more of that now. So there's also parameter-based stuff, how many monsters are on screen. If there's a lot, we'll turn down the basic monsters so that the other ones can come through more and the player skills come through more. It's it's a lot of work that goes into mixing every area. But we still support players changing sliders and things. Hopefully everyone will play with the sound on to start with.
At least once.
Yeah.
Great. Will there be anything to prevent certain player sounds from getting too repetitive? For example, detonate mines, charges?
Charges is still something we're figuring out, because I know in PoE 1 they can be pretty oppressive, like all the time. So yeah, that's something we'll figure out. Not having the sound on monsters is good, and yeah, you want to know when you've got one. But these are questions we're still figuring out. Our main goal right now is getting through the whole game and getting monsters right, ambiences and everything, and then those integral mechanical things are things that will change probably over time as we get a better idea of it. But it's definitely things on our radar for importance.
Cool. For both of you, was there a particular boss or area that either of you found extra challenging to work on? If so, what was it?
That's a good question. I think the main challenge is how many of them are.
Yeah. They all present their own challenges. But one challenge for us is just keeping up with iteration. Like the departments are working on this stuff all the time, and we need to sort of pivot to make sure we, do the right thing for the gameplay. So I guess they all have their own quirks and challenges, but bosses are always just harder because there's so much going on to mix and balance. And it's really important to us in our team that we telegraph things at the right moment. Like there's a lot of work goes into dialogue, making sure some things always trigger a dialogue line from a boss so that you're about to die, or some things might have a play chance, and some effects will always be loud, things like that. Those are challenging to get right, but important.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to boss fights, to make everything very interesting, when you have a really long boss fight, like sometimes 5, 6, 7 minutes, and you have multiple phases, so that can be sometimes challenging. And then I think when it comes to regular areas, to make sure that the intensity is there, but at the same time there's plenty of space for sound effects.
Cool. Are there any old songs or sounds you'd like to go back and remaster in PoE 1?
We tried that once. Shatter sound, anyone? Yeah. No. I mean, that I don't mind talking about that for a second. It was a well-intentioned change, but it actually illuminated something to us, which I think is important, and that's, a lot of these sounds are so, like embedded in people's heads that, it's probably got a direct link to your dopamine receptor or something, so that when you hear it, it's like, oh, good, there's a whole screen gone. So us trying to change that, don't mess with that, don't touch it. And that sound is actually kind of funny because it's only one sound, and it has it'll only play it once within a certain amount of time. So whenever you hear the whole screen just go clink, it's like it's weird from a sound design perspective. Like, we'd want different sounds or things, but in reality, in game, that's what works, and it's cool, and it's been that way for a long time. So don't touch it. If it's not broken, don't touch it. That's what we learned. Sorry.
I guess I would gladly remaster trailer music and make some sort of compilation, maybe mystery box music as well.
Great. We have a question. What is actually the sound of the occultist's explosion ability, Profane Bloom?
I don't know. Something badass. Like, a lot of these things are just done, heat of the moment with what we have at the time. I can't tell you offhand what's that's comprised of. Sorry. I can look when I get back to work.
Would it be possible to have additional dialogue options for resources like mana being low? Is there an option to turn these off?
I like how you added that at the end of the question. So we don't want that to become an oppressive thing. And we have some more variety in that. Like, it won't just be one line that they say. There'll be a pool of options. And we also have pretty cool tech now to know whether the player's in combat when they're saying that stuff. So if you're out of combat, they'll say it more chill, like, oh, I've got no mana. Or if they're in combat, I've got no mana. So it'll be, it'll be reactive to what's actually happening in the time. But yeah, we'll probably have, we haven't figured out how it'll work over the course of the game, because obviously at end game, you don't need your character screaming at you all the time. So we'll figure that out, and there likely will be an option to just disable it, but I don't know yet. Don't quote me on that. We'll see what happens. But the idea is the whole player character dialogue system will be more immersive through the campaign. That's the goal.
Great, and this is going to be our last question for tonight. Will there be dynamic sounds added for weapon strikes based on material being hit? For example, like flesh or stone from a golem?
Yeah, so part of Dominic's painstaking work was every single hit for every single weapon every weapon type, I should say, is baked in with the sound of the armor that you're hitting. So flesh, mud, wood, water, like some of them share, mud and water are the same, but yeah, every single one has to be baked in because we don't want to play too many sounds at once unless we have to. So yeah, that is a thing. And also crit sounds are also baked. So we've redone how crits sound by making more of that armor layer come out when you hit it to know that you've crit, rather than just having a massive explosive sound. It's still satisfying, that's the goal. Every on-hit sound should be satisfying, so yeah.
Cool. Well, that's all the time we have today. Please give another round of applause for these two.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.